All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking part 5 of an absolutely massive 8-part tutorial from Virtualization Options LLC. They're a tech research and advisory group out of Colorado, and this specific tutorial is called IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. So if you already know your way around IPv4 troubleshooting, but your organization is finally making the jump to IPv6, you are in exactly the right place. But listen, you might think your years of IPv4 experience will just seamlessly carry over. Well, I've got to tell you, some of those very assumptions are actually quite dangerous now. So we're going to break down those old habits and really equip you for the actual real-world realities of IPv6 troubleshooting.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start by unlearning your IPv4 habits, then tackle the dual-stack reality, address resolution and routing, the absolute imperative of ICMPv6, some tricky edge cases like tunnels and VPNs, and finally, wrap it up with some essential troubleshooting rules.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Unlearning Your IPv4 Habits. We just need to admit it up front. Your hard-earned IPv4 muscle memory is actively working against you right now.
This first comparison is a real shock to the system. Think about it. In the IPv4 world, you check an interface, you see one IP address like 192.168.1.10, and you're good. If you saw 3 addresses, you'd immediately assume something was terribly misconfigured, right? But with IPv6, having multiple IP addresses on a single interface isn't just normal, it's actually required behavior. It's not an error at all.
And these aren't just random addresses popping up either. They all serve very specific purposes. You're going to have a link local address, usually starting with fee80, a global unicast address for actually routing out to the internet, and temporary privacy addresses. And they're all operating simultaneously on the exact same interface. The real kicker here? They do all of this completely without NAT. Because every single device is now potentially globally routable, this completely flips your traditional firewall and security design right on its head.
Moving on to Section 2, the dual stack reality. Because, let's face it, you almost never run IPv6 in a total vacuum. We're dealing with both protocols running side by side in production.
Now here's a massive trap you need to watch out for, and it's called happy eyeballs. Basically, modern browsers and operating systems are hardwired to prefer IPv6. When they try to connect to a site, they actually race both protocols, and they give IPv6 a head start of about 250 milliseconds. So what does this mean for you? It means a broken IPv6 path will usually mask itself as a slow network because of that fallback latency, rather than just giving you a clean, obvious connection error. Your users are just going to complain that the internet feels sluggish, while your IPv4 tests will look totally fine.
Another tricky dual-stack trap has to do with address assignment. When a device joins an IPv6 network, it runs duplicate address detection, or DAD for short. It sends out a multicast message basically shouting, "Hey, is anyone else using this IP?" If another host answers, the interface gets tagged with a DAD failed flag, and boom, you get 0 global connectivity. So if a host just won't connect globally, you have to check for this specific flag. We often see this triggered by cloned MAC addresses and virtual machines, or maybe your port security is just being overly aggressive in blocking those multicast packets.
All right, Section 3, Address Resolution and Routing. Let's dig into how devices actually find their way around, especially now that our old friends ARP and standard DHCP default routes are completely dead and gone.
Back in IPv4, your DHCP server handed you a default gateway, and you just held on to it until the lease expired. Well, in IPv6, that gateway is delivered entirely through periodic router advertisements, or RAs. Hosts are totally reliant on a constant refresh of these RAs. So if your switch accidentally blocks them, say because of a slight misconfiguration, your hosts will silently drop their default route. And since there's no IPv4-style DHCP lease renewal to fall back on, the connection just breaks. Out of nowhere.
And since ARP is out of the picture, we now rely on the Neighbor Discovery Protocol, or NDP. You've got some handy command line tools right here for clearing the neighbor cache across Linux, Windows, and Cisco systems. Definitely keep these in your back pocket. But here is a really critical warning. NDP relies heavily on IPv6 multicast. If your network switches don't have MLD snooping enabled to properly manage that traffic, they will disastrously flood this NDP traffic to every single port on the switch, and that will absolutely cripple your network performance.
That brings us to Section 4, the ICMPv6 imperative. This part is absolutely crucial.
Okay, pay close attention, because this is arguably the climax of this whole explainer. It's easily the most frustrating silent failure in modern networking.
Have you ever run into a situation where small pings work perfectly, the TCP handshake completes without a hitch, but the absolute second you try to launch an SSH session, or load an HTTPS page, or transfer a file, the connection just totally stalls out? Well, you've got yourself a path MTU discovery black hole. Here's what happens. A large outbound IPv6 packet hits a router that has a smaller MTU limit on the next link. That router tries to do the right thing and sends an ICMPv6 packet too big message back to the source. But if your firewall aggressively blocks that message, the source device literally never knows it needs to shrink its packets, so the data just falls into a void.
This means the old-school security advice of just block all ICMP is fundamentally fatal in the IPv6 world. Consider this your new firewall rulebook. You absolutely, undeniably must permit Type 1, Type 2 for that MTU discovery we just talked about, Type 3, and Types 133 through 137. If you block these, you aren't actually securing your network at all. You're just actively breaking the neighbor discovery protocol, ruining address resolution, and stopping large packet routing. So, the golden rule here? Never, ever block ICMPv6 entirely.
Let's move into Section 5, Tunnels, VPNs, and Edge Cases. This is where we troubleshoot those annoying scenarios where modern IPv6 collides right into legacy architecture.
VPNs are just a notorious pain point here. Legacy VPN clients that don't fully get IPv6 are basically going to do one of two things. They'll either leak your IPv6 traffic straight out to the open internet, completely bypassing your corporate security, or they'll block it entirely, which makes all your dual-stack websites instantly fail. You really have to force the issue here. You either explicitly tell the VPN to tunnel IPv6 by pushing a default route, or you explicitly disable it right on the client. Oh, and you always need to double-check that your internal DNS is actually returning the correct AAA records over that tunnel. Then there's containerization, which honestly brings its own set of nightmares. If you want to stop rogue Docker containers or VMs from spinning up and accidentally hijacking your network traffic by broadcasting their very own router advertisements, you've got to be proactive. You want to aggressively implement RA Guard on all your switch access ports. That ensures only legitimate, authorized routers get to act as gateways. Plus, it's always a good idea to isolate your VM and container traffic into separate VLANs just to contain any potential misconfigurations.
Now, you might also find yourself in an IPv6-only environment that relies on transition mechanisms like NAT64 and DNS64 to communicate with legacy IPv4 servers. And honestly, these are brilliant pieces of engineering. DNS64 basically intercepts a request and synthesizes a fake IPv6 address for the old IPv4 server, while NAT64 handles the actual translation right at the gateway. But listen, consider yourself warned. If you have applications that hardcode IPv4 literal addresses, like someone literally typing 1.2.3.4 into a config file, that is going to completely bypass DNS64 and break the MAT process entirely.
Okay, home stretch. Section 6, Essential IV6 Troubleshooting Rules. Let's consolidate everything we've talked about into a rock-solid operational baseline. Seriously, you might want to print these golden rules out and literally tape them to your monitor. When users complain about network speed, always test your protocols explicitly and independently using tools like curl-6 and curl-4. Respect the fact that ICMPv6 is absolutely necessary for your firewalls. Drill it into your head that NDP has replaced ARP. Learn to embrace that seeing multiple addresses on an interface is perfectly normal and not an immediate crisis. And finally, please document and track your ISP prefix delegations. If your ISP dynamically changes your prefix and you don't know it, your static configs are just going to silently break. We've covered a ton of ground today from Virtualization Options LLC's tutorial. It's all about unlearning the past so we can actually secure the future of our networks. When you see how wildly different these new failure states are, from latency masks caused by happy eyeballs to those incredibly frustrating path MTU black holes, the real question you've got to ask yourself right now is this. Are you ready to adapt to the new rules, or are you still trying to solve tomorrow's problems using yesterday's assumptions? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and seriously, good luck out there on the network.